More Australian Royal Flying Doctor stories. Australia is the world's largest island. It is a huge country, the sixth largest after Russia, Canada, China, the USA and Brazil. The Royal Flying Doctor Service, RFDS, is the largest and most comprehensive aeromedical service in Australia, and probably the world. The perception of its size often relates to its vast operational area, covering 7.69 million square kilometres. The Australian outback, deeply ingrained in Australian heritage, is a vast, remote, rugged, sparsely populated area, one of the largest remaining intact natural areas on Earth. The RFDS serves the outback where only 2% of Aussies live, including Indigenous Aussies, the world's oldest living culture. The outback has the largest cattle and sheep stations and mines in the world. The RFDS also serves bush areas between the outback and the coast. But it's not just area. The scale of the RFDS is also unique in other ways. 24/7 services, including provision of medical chests for remote communities to use with telephone instructions from RFDS doctors. 80 aircraft, including jets and helicopters, and a road fleet. Over 300,000 patient contacts per annum including transport, telehealth, and fly-in fly-out clinics for medical, dental, mental and educational support. The map shows the main bases and flight routes. Actual flights extend beyond these to remote towns, stations, mines, and emergency airstrips on roads. The first RFDS flight in 1928 was a de Havilland DH-50 fabric-covered biplane leased from Qantas, modified to carry a stretcher patient. This was followed by de Havilland DH-83 Foxmoths and DH-84 Dragons. After World War II, there were de Havilland Doves and Drovers, Beechcraft Barons, Travellers, Queen Airs, and Dukes, Cessna 180s, 182s, and 421Bs, and Piper Chieftains and Navajos. From the 1980s, there were turboprops, Beechcraft King Airs, Cessna Conquests, and Pilatus PC-12s. Later, Pilatus PC-24 jets. In Western Australia, Airbus EC-145 helicopters are used for shorter flights. Early RFDS flying was dangerous. Primitive aircraft, limited instrumentation, no GPS, no navigation aids, and rudimentary airstrips. Modern RFDS flying is safer but still very challenging. Critical patient conditions, and associated stress on crew. Usual bad weather, but also including cyclones and dust storms. Still many basic airstrips, short, unpaved, uneven, animals. Single pilot operations. Fatigue from callouts and irregular shifts. Remoteness, complicating fuel, diversion and contingency planning. Different loading, complicating aircraft weight and balance calculations. Now we will replicate in Microsoft Flight Simulator some of the flying stories from this book, editing the stories for brevity and clarity. Story number 1. DH-83 Foxmoth. Payware. A very early RFDS aircraft. Flight plan. YBCS Cairns. Freeware. Northwest to YPMP Pormpuror. Default. I was amazed that in my earlier years as a pilot with the RFDS, based at Cairns, just how we were able to find some of the places, because we had little to no navigation aids at all. But there were techniques you could use. Like, once you got airborne, if you held the planned heading and allowed for the forecast wind speed and direction, in the end you could only be out by as far as the forecast was wrong, and there was always the potential for errors in the forecast. Easy to loose your way out here in the outback without GPS. Taking this into consideration, flying to a place on the coast, like the Pormpuror Aboriginal community, You would lay off a lot to one side, say 10 miles north of the community, and then when you came out of cloud, or if it was at night, you knew you had to turn left when you crossed the coast. If you did not allow for this variation, you would not know which way to turn. Story number 2. De Havilland Moth. Freeware. Another early RFDS aircraft. Flight plan. YBAS Alice Springs. Freeware. To YTNK Tennant Creek. Freeware. Twice, then. YBAS Alice Springs. To YPAD Adelaide. Freeware. Early one morning in Alice Springs with the RFDS, I got a call about an accident up north in Tennant Creek. I was the only pilot IFR rated in the de Havilland Moth, so the doctor and I took off together as quickly as possible. It was about 2 hours there, half an hour on the ground, and then 2 hours back to Alice Springs. Visit scheduled from Alice Springs that day, so after we got back to Alice from Tennant Creek, I said let's still do the medical visit. Now you don't like to cancel those if you can help it, because at the remote settlements everyone comes from miles around to see us. We just got back to Alice from the medical visit when the hospital rang to say they had a serious case of peritonitis in Tennant Creek, so back we went for another 4-hour return flight. I just got home in Alice Springs after 2 4-hour trips to Tennant Creek and a short medical visit in between when the phone rang again. It was the surgeon in Alice Springs who begged me to fly a serious patient down south to Adelaide, about 6 hours, as she was at risk of brain damage if kept on the anaesthetic machine too much longer. So after stripping the seats out of the aircraft to fit in all the needed medical gear, off I went again with the patient, doctor and nurse. On the trip down to Adelaide, I was in cloud for the whole time. I was pretty stuffed by the time we finally began our descent into Adelaide, and when we broke out of the cloud, at about 500 feet, it was as clear as a bell. Seeing the lights of Adelaide less than a mile in front was the most beautiful sight, because for 5 or 6 hours I hadn't seen a thing, not even a star. By the time we landed at Adelaide, I'd spent 18 hours in the air. Back then there was no one else in Alice Springs rated to fly on instruments. Nowadays, there are plenty of trained pilots and plenty of aircraft. Anyway, the woman survived, and that's the most important thing. Story number 3. King Air Aircraft. Freeware. Flight Plan. YBCS Cairns. Freeware. Northwest to YKLG Kalinga Station. Default scenery. As time went by, we started getting basic navigational aids, NDBs and VORs. Then in the early 1990s we got GPS in our King Airs. In the middle of a wet season while I was at a conference in Cairns, we got a call out to an emergency at remote Kalinga Station. The nursing sister and I set off immediately. The only problem was that it was raining so heavily, visibility was poor. One of the things about visual flying is that once you come off instrument flying, there has to be sufficient visibility to conduct a visual circling approach rather than straight into a runway. On this occasion, we did not have enough visibility, and each time we tried to make a circuit, we would lose sight of the runway. After 3 attempts, we had to pull out of that one, and we never got there. 3 vehicles were already bogged on the airstrip with the patient, so even if we landed, we probably would have been stuck there. It was actually a pretty rare event when our RFDS aircraft was unable to reach a patient. In the end, in this case, they somehow managed to get a 4-wheel drive vehicle out to the property and evacuate the patient to a nearby town, and then by helicopter to a larger town. A roundabout route to go, but he survived. Drone footage in good weather. Story number 4. Pilatus PC-12 aircraft. Payware. YPAG Port Augusta. To YOK Cook. Freeware. To Waiatakula. Freeware. To YTRG Trigger Road Strip. Freeware. From Port Augusta we were sent to Cook, out on the Nullarbor Plain, for a sick patient on the Indian Pacific train. Note, the Nullarbor Plain, meaning no tree, is a vast outback desert stretching over 1,000 kilometres across the southern part of South Australia. The few small remote towns across the Nullarbor service some of the world's longest straight sections of road and rail. It was a high priority, and when we landed, the doctor came along and said we would have to taxi into town because the patient is too sick to be transported to the airport. The airport was about 500 meters from the town, so off the airport I went, onto the track and taxi into town. It's just one of those things you would never come across anywhere else. It's the same in Takula, which is also out on the railway line. When we go there for clinics, they say follow the track and park the aircraft behind the hospital. On the highway, A few sections of the road are made into landing strips. When there is an emergency, RFDS staff coordinate with the police or local authorities who stop the traffic for the landing and takeoff. Thanks for watching. Hope you liked. To finish up, enjoy this real-life footage of the first landing, in 2019, of a brand new RFDS Pilatus PC-24 on an unpaved Australian outback airstrip. The PC-24 is the world's first business jet designed with a standard cargo door, and to take off and land on short and or unpaved runways.